Welcome to another edition of College Basketball Net Profit Pub Sports Radio, Friday, November 11th. Ian Cameron, Conor Mack with you, ready to break down another college basketball card. A lot more games to attack and talk about today compared to yesterday. I'll be honest, I had two best bets on the show yesterday. Man, was I lucky to get the 1-1 split with those two games. Obviously, the total in the Nicholls State-Wyoming game fell short. That was one of them. And the other looked like it was dead at halftime and early second half with Northern Arizona plus 16.5. But the Lumberjacks roared back and hit a three right before the buzzer to lose by 16 and slip inside the number by the hook. I will take it with the 1-1 with those yesterday. It was a down day for me in college basketball. We had an incredible first day. Wednesday was good. Yesterday was the first day where, hey, we gave some back, but that's okay. I like this card. Looking forward to seeing what it brings. Conor Mack, how was your Thursday?
It was pretty good. The show, though, I'll be right with you, though. I was glad just for the 2 for 2 in Vermont. I'd like the 3-in-1 night, but man, St. Mary's took care of business at home. Vermont not ready to roll there. So, yeah, 2-2. But I took Santa Clara. I had a few other bets that ended up okay. So it was an okay day. But let's get to it today, my man. I'm ready to roll.
I'm ready to roll. And this is one of the biggest cards we've had on this show, well, since Monday when we opened things up. But it is a big card. Lots to discuss. We got a great showcase game with Gonzaga and Michigan State on ESPN next hour at the airplane hangar there, the USS Abraham Lincoln in San Diego, outdoor game on the ship. So looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But we will start with the featured games, as we always do, with UAB taking on Toledo. Now, quickly, we need to jump on this because it's just about to tip off. UAB 5-point favorites here. The total 156.5 across the board. I did play this game over the total. Two very good offensive teams. Both play extremely fast. I mean, we're tight on time. This game's about to tip off. Just keeping it short and simple. I'm on the over. I'm not betting against UAB. This team is really good. I think Jelly Walker, we know he is just an incredible player for UAB. Toledo's really good offensively, though. I'm fascinated to see how this game plays out. I've got it on in the background here as we're doing this show. It's just about to tip off. I'm on the over. I lean UAB, but I didn't touch the side. Conor, any thoughts on this one as it's just about to start?
No, I lean Toledo a little bit, even though I really like UAB. I like both these schools. The problem with Toledo is on the road. They're just not as good. And we know they're not great defensively, but man, they can fill the bucket. And I don't blame you. I think there should be some points here. Obviously, I think UAB a little bit better at times defensively than Toledo. But I thought 5, maybe they can hang around because this is, Wells Fargo Center. So I think they could get it done. So I lean Toledo. And real quick, that other game, Air Force, Delaware. It just tipped 2. Under nothing there. Under the 130.5.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. Certainly, on Air Force, I tried to trust their offense to win a game on the road the other night, and it didn't play out too well. So, not exactly an offense that we fully trust, especially away from home or in that situation there against Delaware. That game, you're right, it's just about to tip off as well. All right, next up here as we continue along here on the Net Profit Show, and shout out to Dabby Cab. I want to mention him because he's going to be coming on not long after this show ends. At around, I believe, 6:30 Eastern for the 6:15 it might be when he goes on the air for a live bet stream with our guy Razor Sharp Picks with Michigan State and Gonzaga. They'll be doing a live bet stream during that game, so make sure you check it out. And they might be hanging around later on for the college football. I don't know. It's just what Jimmy said earlier today. It's up to Dabby. That's why if you want them to stay on later than just that game, tune in. That will ensure that maybe they give them the incentive to stick around after the basketball ends. But they will be around for Michigan State, Gonzaga, Dabby, and Razor at 6:15 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check that out. Like I said, it'll be barely 15 minutes after we wrap up this show here, Net Profit. All right, Houston St. Joe's. We've got Houston, obviously 21.5 point road favorites in this game. Huge number. Look, St. Joe's doesn't play defense. Houston does. And Houston, I think, might have one, last year they showed it. They can score the basketball. That was always sometimes what held Houston back. Not anymore. They've got offense this year. They absolutely steamrolled their opponent in the first game. I think it's going to be a rough day for St. Joseph's here. Rough night for them in this game. Houston early in the season, they gave me that look that they're ready to go. to begin the season, a team that's got national championship aspirations, one of the best defensive teams, one of the best rebounding teams in the country, an elite head coach in Kelvin Sampson, who's done a great job here with Houston. Houston rewarded me when I laid the points with them in their first game. I'm coming right back to it here. In fact, because they're away from home, you actually get maybe a mini discount here. I like Houston here to roll past this St. Joe's team. Huge discrepancy in defensive acumen between these two teams. Connor, Mack, what do you think?
Yeah, this is going to be tough for St. Joe's. They lost a couple of their best scorers last year, and they were not a failure last year, but they were able, to have a couple good games. I remember Auburn early in the year. They played well against St. Bonaventure. They had a few good games. Scoring will be difficult for them after they were kind of an over team last year. Yeah, it would be Houston or nothing. They rolled kind of what I talked about on the show. It was 83-36. I might have said 40 on the show. It's Houston or pass. This team should dominate. Every once in a while, though, Houston's sleepy, and it got me last year, and I mentioned it. It didn't, though, game one. But and maybe it won't here, just like the first week, the first 4 or 5 games. But, yeah, Houston or pass.
All right. This is one of the highlight games of the card. Obviously, ESPN, they're rolling out the number one broadcast crew for their college basketball, Dan Shulman and Jay Billis, Michigan State and Gonzaga in San Diego on the ship. And we've got Gonzaga here laying double digits, 11.5-point favorites. 148 the total opened at, all the way down now to 142. And look, when I saw the total open at 148, I said, I can see people betting it under. But now that it's 142, I mean, it doesn't mean I'm betting over now at 142, because it is an odd sight line, odd setting. It's a Gonzaga team that, defensively, I had concerns about them with the way they played in their scrimmage games. But against North Florida, it looked a lot better. But at the same time, Michigan State will push the ball in transition. Gonzaga is one of the fastest paced tempo teams in college basketball. The total is now in the low 140s. And even if these teams are just above average shooting the basketball, they could probably get over a 142. It's not a total I'm playing. I'm just saying if you're still betting it under now at 142, I'd have my issues trying to trust an under now with the number being where it is. As far as the side goes, I think Gonzaga's got some matchup situations in their favor. Who's going to check Drew Timme in the paint for Michigan State? They lost their big starting center from last year. I think that could be a bit of a concern. Tom Izzo says he likes what this team has at the disposal. He says they've got inside-outside balance. He likes their ability to defend this year. Well, that's going to be put to the test here, obviously, in this game facing Gonzaga. I wanted to back Gonzaga here against Michigan State because Michigan State's going to be a prove-it team for me before I'm ready to trust them against one of the top teams in the country. But I didn't want to lay this many points. You know what I mean? I would have been comfortable with 6, maybe even 7, 8. We're talking 11.5, 12 now. That's a few too many points for me. I lean Gonzaga. Now with the number being where it is, I actually lean over, but it's going to be a sit back and watch, a special night. They're going to talk about the troops, obviously, during the broadcast. So special game, nice thing to do on Veterans Day. But I'm just going to sit back and watch. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, shout out real quick to all the veterans on Veterans Day. We appreciate you, no doubt, for protecting our country. Men, women, everybody, thank you so much to all the veterans. Yeah, this game's always a lot of fun outdoor, on the ship. When I looked up, the weather looks pretty nice. I mean, I have 60s. I don't have really barely any wind. It's always crazy. You mentioned the sight line and everything, but it was a little high, the total. But this was a pretty big drop. I think Gonzaga, the way they push it, could still get in the 80s. And I think I kind of lean over. If I was thinking this drop to 141, I might look the other way. You mentioned it. Timme should dominate. Both teams loaded. It's always fun to watch this early on. But it is a lot. Can Michigan State hang in there? I think they can, maybe. Not one I'm in a bet. I kind of want the over a little bit now. I just don't know if I get to the window. At 142. And I lean Michigan State. If I could get a couple more, I'd really be on them. If I get 14 or 15, I'd really like them.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to watch it. The USS Abraham Lincoln here in San Diego. You're right. It's supposed to be no rain, wind light. So it's almost like you got to cap this game from a totals perspective like a football game. Wind's not going to impact the trajectory of the shots. And as a result, I think that's beneficial for the over. I lean that way now just simply because of how low the number is dropped. Remember, you got pace on the Gonzaga side. They get the ball up the floor quickly. Can't lose sight of that. All right, next up here as we continue along, Clemson, South Kakalaki. Clemson, 3-point favorites here on the road. 135 the total. Of course, a new head coach here for South Carolina, Lamont Paris, taken over here for the Gamecocks after Frank Martin went to a UMass in the offseason. Clemson, by the way, they've got their point guard back, who's a pretty good player, Chase Hunter. But outside of that, there's a lot of production that is being replaced this season for Clemson. I'm not ready to lay 3 on the road with this group. I know continuity-wise with Brownell, the same coaching staff and system, and you're putting in new systems. South Carolina, by the way, is slowing things down this year. Remember, under Martin last year, a very fast-paced team. They're emphasizing more half-court, deliberate pace this year under the new head coach. So I think the under might actually get there in this game. The total sitting at around 136.5, 135 in most spots. It's already been bet down a little bit. I think it's going to be probably a little bit of a lower scoring game. I like South Carolina. I talked about this game with Jimmy earlier today on betting with the bag. I think South Carolina would be the look for me at +3 in this game. Not ready to lay it on the road with Clemson. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I'm not ready to lay it either, but I'm not jumping for South Carolina too much either with this short a number, at least. They had a tough game against South Carolina State. They were pesky. It was close. I got to see a little more out of Clemson. You mentioned Hunter's back, but they still have a few key guys that are out. I think this is some shots missed, defensive type game. You mentioned them slowing it down with Martin gone. I kind of lean under. I have not bet it at 135, but I'd lean under.
Yeah, I did play a small bet here on South Carolina. Not best bet material, but I did jump on it. Once it got to 3, I'm like, I'm in. I'll take South Carolina now at that number. All right, next up, we got Mississippi State and Akron. This is the second of the Barstool Sports Invitational. By the way, if you're looking for that UAB Toledo game, this isn't in on television anywhere. You got to go to barstool.tv, and it's there, live stream only. It's a Barstool production. So if you're looking for the UAB Toledo game and this game, Mississippi State, Akron, that is where you find them. Mississippi State, 6-point favorites here. Neutral floor. This is obviously in Philly, Wells Fargo Center. 128.5 the total in this game. I like the Akron Zips a little bit. I mean, we saw Mississippi State last year. Wasn't exactly a team that I thought got most of their potential. This is a good MAC squad here. Akron, one of the better teams expected to be in the MAC this year. John Gross back once again as the head coach. They survived in overtime against South Dakota State. I did take South Dakota State against Akron. They cashed the ticket for me there, and I faded Akron in that game. But here now I'm kind of looking at Akron in the underdog role, Mississippi State team that, look, I think I like the hiring of Chris Jans. I think is going to do a solid job, but you're talking about a little bit of a, pace change, a little bit of a schematic change now from the Ben Howland days here at Mississippi State. And when you look at the overall returning experience for this team, a little bit light there in that regard. I think when it's all said and done here, this Akron team offense is certainly they are capable. I like them here getting 6 in this matchup here against Mississippi State. And again, from a continuity standpoint, you have to give a little bit of an advantage here to Akron. Still the same coach, same systems in place, where now you're trying to adjust and learn to a new coaching staff here if you're Mississippi State. Although, like I said, Chris Jans did a great job at New Mexico State. Yeah. And I think when you look at it, he's a good hire. I just think it's going to take this team, and it's going to take him in particular time to see the results play out in a positive manner. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little time, but I think they're just going to want to play it slow. They're pretty good defensively, not a great offense. And you mentioned the flip side, Akron, pretty good offense, pushes it a little bit, has the scorers. This one's going to be interesting. I don't think it goes up and down. I don't know. I just want to see this a little bit early, how it goes. I think it's more slower. Obviously, we have a low total. Maybe this game's in the 60s. But if that is, I think Akron, the way they can score, Ian, will be in this game. So I agree with you. I know it's not, 7 or 7.5 anymore. It's basically 6. But I'd lean them a little bit here. I think this could be a dogfight.
I would agree with that. SMU Dayton now next up here. We've got a pretty interesting matchup. Dayton 11-point home favorites, 132.5, 133 being the total in this game. The SMU Mustangs, one of the teams expected to be in the mix to win the Atlantic 10. Sorry, I should say SMU, the AAC, I should say. No question about that. The Mustangs, last year we'll have to see how they carry it over into this season. But definitely when you look at them, certainly have got some offensive capabilities. There's no question about that. It's going to be interesting to see if Dayton can slow them down. Dayton definitely, they're going to have some size. They're going to have some length. In their favor in this matchup, no question about that. I'm a little surprised the total is this low because when you look at SMU, especially with the way they played in their opener, they did shoot a lot of threes. They were willing to push the ball up the court. It could be a scenario where the total's a hair bit low, in my opinion, here at 132, 132.5. It really is an interesting game because I think Dayton, when you look at it, a lot of people are petrified to bet against this team, on that home floor of theirs where they've been obviously very good in recent years. But you're asking them now 11 here in this game. Anthony Grant, I know, has done a nice job with this team. Deron Holmes, Malachi Smith leading them. Of course, SMU brings in Rob Lanier now, the head coach for this SMU group. Definitely a nice trio of guys that can fill it up. They're all upperclassmen: Zach Nuttall, Samuel Williamson, Ricardo Wright. I think that trio is very solid offensively. And I feel like when you look at this game, you've got three upperclassmen scorers that can really get you some offense and some instant buckets. And you're getting this team at 11-point dogs. I think it's a few too many here. I think SMU can stay inside this number against Dayton. And I don't agree with the total going down the way it has. I think 132.5 is just a little bit low for the way SMU has been shooting the three, pushing the ball a bit. Dayton does kind of want to play a little bit more half court, but will they get their preferred pace? That remains to be seen. And even if they do, all you need is decent offensive efficiency. You can get over a number of 132.5 with the total. So I like the over. I like the dog as well. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, SMU has lost a few, and this is a team that I faded a lot the last couple of years. There were some high expectations, and against some bad teams, they'd come through. You mentioned Nuttall's pretty good. Phelps, they have to be. Those are kind of like it, though, for them. At least now, they're looking for other pieces, so they have to play big, and they're going to have big minutes. So I grabbed this at 13 last night. I thought it was just too much. I think 11 is still decent, just a bit too many points. We know Dayton, they're ranked just inside the top 25. A few guys, Elvis is good, Holmes, Langney. They should be solid here at home. And one problem, though, not wanting SMU is they've been bad. They've been bad on the road. They've been bad against the number. But I just thought this was too big a little bit. I think they could stay within 10. So I have nothing on the total. I think you're right. It could creep over, could just stay under. But especially, I'd like it if it was under. I think that means you would stay within the number. If this game's, high 50s, mid 60s, SMU could cover.
I agree with that. I think it's just a few too many points here. All right, let's go to West Virginia and Pittsburgh. Backyard brawl, basketball version. West Virginia, 2.5-point road favorites, 135.5 the total in this one. I grabbed West Virginia right away. And this is someone that lost fading Pitt. In fact, if you watched Monday's show, I was on Tennessee Martin plus the points against Pitt, and they got destroyed by Pitt. But then we turn around and we see Tennessee Martin get absolutely destroyed again by Youngstown State in their second game. And suddenly you start to think to yourself, maybe you had the right idea about fading Pitt. Maybe Tennessee Martin's just not very good right now, because that was 2 games in a row. Tennessee Martin got their doors blown off. So the bottom line is, after seeing that, that UT Martin got whitewashed by Youngstown, I'm not ready to say, oh, Pitt destroyed UT Martin. Maybe this team's better than I thought. No, I didn't think this team was great coming into the year. And now they're going to be taking a big step up in class. West Virginia is a lot more physical, solid defensive team. You know what you're going to get from them: defense and rebounding. It's shooting that continues to be the issue for Huggy Bear and his West Virginia teams all these years. You're going to have to hope they iron that out. But I could see Pittsburgh's offense coming back to earth. They're down to earth. They're not going to shoot like they did against Tennessee Martin. Tennessee Martin's been pathetic defensively in 2 games this week. Now you're going to be up against a much different challenge here against West Virginia. I think the Mountaineers, too, when you look at it, they've got the ability to hit Pitt inside and be able to score some easy buckets with that size that they have around the rim. And I think they pull this one out. I don't think West Virginia goes to Pitt and blows out Pitt necessarily, but I got to favor them to win this basketball game. And that's pretty much all they have to do, laying just 2.5 here. You could go minus 145 on the money line like I did, which is I actually bet the money line here with West Virginia, but I like them to get the job done. What do you think here, Connor?
Yeah, we know one thing. West Virginia will at least play some defense. You mentioned they struggle to shoot it. Emmett Matthews, one of their better scorers on the team, should be good. On the other side, Pittsburgh, I don't know what to make it. They scored 80. They shot it. They did not shoot it well. I think they shot like 36 or 37%. So that was kind of skewed. I don't think Tennessee Martin is pretty rough.
Now,
To
UT
start
Martin had
the
a
year.
shit ton of turnovers too. Keep that in mind
Yes,
as well.
ton in that game. You're
good.
right. They had a bunch. So I don't know about the side. I'd maybe lean a little bit West Virginia, but I'd be on the under. With that, just these two teams remind me to get into a game like this at this number. I'd be on the under.
Yeah, I think the total under is a good way to go with that. I didn't bet it, but I certainly understand why people would like under in this matchup. All right, next up, we've got Florida State, UCF. We've got Florida State 2-point road favorites, 145.5 the total. Both of these teams suffered brutal performances in their first game. I mean, Florida State losing as 17-point favorites to Stetson in their first game, and it wasn't much better for UCF. They lose outright to NC Asheville to get their season underway. So you would think, in theory, both of these teams want to show up with better efforts. I mean, I certainly favor the personnel of Florida State over UCF. Leonard Hamilton said in a lot of preseason quotes of his that he likes the depth on this team. He thinks they're really, really strong. They always do have a pretty good bench, but they just collectively, the whole team, starters and bench, struggled against Stetson. I kind of think it's a good bounce back for Florida State, who I still think are better than UCF, but I think the total is the better route because both of these teams, they just could not get stops defensively in the first game. I think the total is the better look in this game than the side. I like over 144 in this game, 144.5. It's funny, it went up to 146. I even saw some 147s, and now it's actually come back the other way a little bit. So it went up to the money came in on the over initially. Now it's come back the other way a little bit, but I like over here. I mean, these two teams just did not play good defensive basketball the first game they played, and I'm going to have to see improvement here. And I think the total's modest. I mean, mid-140s, I think you can get up and over that number. What do you think here, Connor? Florida State, UCF?
On the total, I think so as well. I just think there's a few games like that today where I think people are jumping on the over, and we'll get to some later. And now we're seeing some buyback, like, hold on. But I'd like a little bit the over here as well. Florida State, what's going on? All this talent, on this team, and to lose like that to Stetson is all right, but come on, Stetson, 17-point favorites, not very good. You mentioned 83-79, no defense for this Florida State team. On the other side, they went to OT to Asheville. That game was almost in the hundreds, obviously. So I lean over in this one. Right now, I take Florida State. I would they have the more talent. I think they get it done, but I got to watch more of them before I'm going to put my money on them, even laying, the bucket here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think Florida State personnel-wise grades out as the better team, but when you have that kind of loss against Stetson in first game, it makes me wonder, is it going to take maybe a few games for you to get your act in gear? We'll have to wait and see on that.
They were bad, too, against the number. They were just bad towards the end of the year last year.
They were. They were not covering point spreads. They were an awful team, really at both ends of the floor. Offensively, it came and went, and defensively, it just evaporated for Florida State down the stretch last year. We'll see if they can improve on that this year. All right, we got two more games left in our marquee game segment of the show. Stanford, Wisconsin, next up here. Pac-12 versus Big Ten. Wisconsin 4-point favorites, 135 the total in this game. I'm on the Stanford Cardinal. I think this is actually one of the better squads Gerard Haas has had here at Stanford since he's been the head coach. You look at Wisconsin. I wonder how much of a adjustment it's going to be no Johnny Davis this year. He was everything to them offensively last year for the Badgers. And now this year, the offense is going to reverberate a lot more around Tyler Wall, who's basically going to be, more of the centerpiece, the focal point. And then after that, there's really a dearth of proven, capable scoring options for the Badgers. And that seems to always be the case with Wisconsin year in and year out. They got that one guy that scares you. And if you can keep him in check, you can really play good defense against this Wisconsin team. Whereas Stanford, there was a question mark about one of their key players who happens to be not only a good scorer for them, but one of their best defenders. It looks like he's going to be available for this game, and that's significant because he's going to get the primary assignment on Wall. That's important when you're playing Wisconsin. And I just think the Badgers here are a team that's going to take some early season growing pains potentially. Now, obviously, they got it done in their first game, but it was a pretty easy opponent for them. Stanford kind of labored as well with Pacific, and I think because of that, you're getting maybe Wisconsin a little overvalued, Stanford a little undervalued based on just one game, which to me is always something you don't want to overreact to, and that's just what happens in one single game of a very long season. So I like Stanford here getting points. I think at the very least they're in this game, a 1-2 possession game, and it wouldn't shock me if they even go there and squeak out the outright win here. What do you think, Connor? Stanford, Wisconsin.
I agree with you a little bit. I'd be on the points or nothing here with Stanford. I was shocked kind of how fast they played with Pacific, how much they scored. Wisconsin, though, I don't know what to make of him. You mentioned Walls kind of be the guy. Can Hepburn, step up, kind of be the number 2 there? He had a decent game in their first one. I think this one is tighter. We finally see it. I don't know that Pacific game because I think this is more of a Wisconsin type game in the 60s. So this would be the under for me. And yeah, I lean the points. I even saw this move to 3.5. A lot of bucks, Ian. A few hours ago. Now basically 4 everywhere. So yeah, I'd lean Stanford or lean the under.
All right, last of the marquee games that we'll talk about, a good one on the West Coast, and these are always good games for Connor Mack, especially because, a lot of the games are early. This is a nice late game, BYU and San Diego State. We've got San Diego State, 11-point home favorites, 139 the total. This game, of course, at the legendary Viejas Arena, of course, in San Diego, which is a great home environment for San Diego State and has been for many years. We'll see if it once again is this year. BYU, it's an interesting team to look at coming into this year. We know BYU is usually a team that we expect great things from. Last year was a bit of an up and down kind of year for the BYU Cougars. And look, they struggled in their first game. I mean, Idaho State, they won 60-56. They barely escaped with the victory. Meanwhile, San Diego State, 80-57. They take care of business in that opening game against Cal State Fullerton. When you look at the San Diego State Aztecs, of course, Matt Bradley, big part of what they do offensively. Trammell, Mensah. You look at the Aztecs, certainly they've got, I think, a little bit more firepower this year. Brian Dutcher, the head coach, was hinting that this team may be wanting to play a little bit quicker this year, because of the fact they feel this is one of the better offensive teams potentially that the Aztecs have had. Will it play out in their totals? I bring that up, Connor, because I'm thinking that Brian Dutcher saying that we might want to try to speed it up just a little bit this year. Might be why the over is taking money here, because the total opened in this game 136.5, and I'm seeing 139. And even 140 in a couple spots. So we know BYU is typically a team we're not scared of betting overs with, but usually with San Diego State, they've been such a good defensive team, and we've seen all these years where they can go into droughts offensively. Yet Dutcher likes this team offensively, and he thinks they're capable with the offense they have of being able to speed up the pace just a little bit. So I'm fascinated because I think if we see a track meet tonight with San Diego State, you might be able to ride their overs until the odds makers catch up, because if this team is better offensively than we think it is, and as Dutcher says they are, and they try to play faster as well, you're going to be able to capitalize on 130s for a long period of time with San Diego State overs totals until they adjust. So I lean to the over. I'm fascinated to see, because again, this is going to be a telltale sign, because if they are playing faster and if they're the better offensive team we think they're capable of being, then this could be a situation where there's going to be value on the over tonight, and there could be value on the overs with San Diego State in the short term until there's an adjustment. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I got to see it, though, really to believe it. Obviously, they bring back those 4 stars, like you mentioned. Menza, very good down low. Bradley, he can hold the rock and basically do what he wants. He'll lead the team in scoring. The question mark here is with BYU. that struggle they had the other night against Idaho State to only score 60 on them is not good. I know they've lost a ton. They brought in some transfers that should do well, and I think they get better as the year goes on. I think this is a tough spot. I'm shocked. I guess that's what you just said. Everyone's thinking maybe they score more, but I just think this is too much of a rivalry. I wanted to go back to some of the games just last year. 72-62 BYU won that in Provo. Different teams a little bit. I think they win by 10 here to San Diego State. I just think the total's now too high. When I see 140, I want the under. I'm leaning that way pretty strong, and I think I'm going to take it. I just think now it's gone up a little bit too much. I'm worried, though. BYU, defensively, they've not always been great, and they could get burned here. And offensively, I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know who's going to step up here with BYU. Barcelo's not there. I don't know who's going to score.
They look like
he was such a big
Alex Barcelo in that Idaho State game. They only scored 60 in that game.
Exactly. He was such a big part kind of last year to an okay BYU team. He's gone. They seem like they need to find out who it's going to be with all these transfers and stuff that have come in, the new players, and it might take some time.
Yeah, it might take, and they've got talent. Spencer Johnson was a nice addition. They expect a lot out of Traore, who's returning again this year for BYU. But again, they look like an offense in disarray without Barcelo the first game. And if you're in disarray without Barcelo that first game against Idaho State at home, say what you will about, you can talk all you want, Connor, about Brian Dutcher wants to speed it up. He thinks he's got a better offensive team. He's still got one of the best defensive teams in college basketball. And if BYU struggling to score against Idaho State, what's going to happen tonight?
That's what I think of a little bit. I mean, could they get maybe 60? Is it there? And San Diego State doesn't need to go crazy offensively. To them, 70 is a lot, 75. So boom, you got the under. So I lean under now at 140.
There you go. All right, lean into the under there with BYU San Diego State. All right, the marquee games in the books. So now we open the floor. Games that Connor likes, games that I like that we didn't get to, and I'll rhyme. We'll be here until 8 p.m. tonight if I were to go in depth on every bet I've made here on the board. So I'm always going to go rapid fire with my games. Connor Mack, let's start with you. Your games that we have not hit on yet that you like from a betting standpoint.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a few. Let's get to this big one that we didn't get to. Villanova, Temple. This game, I've gone back and forth a ton. Villanova's kind of owned them lately. Obviously, the last 10 years, Villanova has had unreal teams, all basically top 10 teams everywhere they've been. Still no more. Caleb Daniel was good in that first win. They didn't get the cover against LaSalle. This is a rivalry that's always bothers me, these, no matter kind of what's going on. So I'm leery, but I'm going to lay it here, 5.5 with Villanova. I think they get it done. The key is done and battle. That's it for Temple. And with those two guys that can score, they've helped them down the stretch a little bit. But for them to struggle against Wagner and lose and have that bad of a second half, and Wagner, pretty good basketball team. We know that, Ian. But to lose to them and kind of fold in the second half, I'm still leery, but I'd have to be on Villanova here. And nothing on the total. Obviously, I think both teams are very slow, but we're not getting a huge on the total. I'd lean under. But I'm going to lay it with Nova. What do you think?
You got two snails. I would only look under as well. And I'm with you. I have not pulled the trigger, and I keep thinking, why aren't you doing it? I would only take Villanova. I'm with you on the side here 100%. They did backdoor me the other night. LaSalle did. But keep in mind, Villanova had a huge lead in that game, and LaSalle got through the back door in the final minute. It was Villanova in complete control of that game. They looked solid out of the gate. I think Temple is really going to struggle to put the ball in the bucket offensively all season, but especially against teams that defend. And I think that's one thing that's not going to go away with Villanova under the new coach, Kyle Neptune, even with Jay Wright gone, is that defensive aptitude. So I'm with you. I would only look at the Villanova side here in this game. All right, what else have you got, C-Mac?
Yeah, let's get to this next one. I thought this total was really, really low here in Princeton Navy. You get a total here of 134.5. It's moved up now a little bit, 135.5, but I got 134.5. We know if Princeton wants to play. They're an over team already, 83-77 loss to Hofstra. They like to play quick. But looking into Navy last year, they could play really, really slow at times in the Patriot League, but they played a ton of games in the high 70s and 80s, and that's where I think Princeton brings it here in this one. It might not go crazy over, but I think both teams could get in the 70s easily here. Not a ton of defense. Both teams shot it well. Navy did in their first one. So I think both teams get in the 70s in this game. Tough one to pick. Maybe lean Navy on today, but I love this over. This total's too low. What do you think?
Certainly, I cashed an over with Princeton in their first game, and I like that one quite a bit in that matchup that they had to start the season, and it flew over the total that game. Mitch Henderson, the head coach against Hofstra, and we'll get to Hofstra in a minute when they play Iona, but I'm pretty much giving it away right now. I was on Hofstra Princeton over the other night. You pretty much know what I'll like in that Hofstra game later against Iona, but definitely in this one, I'm with you. I would look at potentially an over. The one concern with Navy is, with them in terms of tempo, sometimes not exactly a team that's going to always look to speed it up. I mean, in terms of tempo, 343, they're very slow. That's the only drawback. And offensively, last year was a bit of a struggle for them. First game, though, this year with William and Mary, they put up 74 points against Bill and his bitch, as I like to call them, and 74 points, which is pretty good for a team that's ultra slow. Makes me think they could score against this Princeton team, which is still a little leaky defensively. So the only concern I have is the Navy pace, but it's 135.5. It's not asking a lot. You get reasonable offensive efficiency. You could get yourself over that total.
That's what I saw. And even last year was the efficiency from them. And I think Princeton gets into the 70s. They want to get up a little bit more. And they're just not great defensively. So just too low. And this was even 33.5. Some places now that, it's moved a little bit. But let's get into my last one.
Third game, and I have a play on this next game that you're talking about, so I'm fascinated to hear what you like with Eastern Washington and Yale.
Yeah, let's get right to it. Another Yale here as we're getting in with Princeton, all these teams. I like the over here, Ian. This one's pretty simple to me. This is dead over. I thought this total was way too low. I got 146.5. At this number, I think this should be moved all the way to 150. Eastern Washington can shoot it from everywhere, and they don't play any defense. And Yale is a team at times that can struggle to score, but I think they can, and don't play a lot of defense. They easily give teams up all last year and so in the 80s. So this one to me is an over. So I think Yale could creep into the 70s. I think Eastern Washington get in the mid 80s. As long as these shots are dropping, not a lot of defense between both these teams. Give me the over, 147.
Well, you can cross off one game from my list of games that I was going to bring up because this was one of my games, and it's the same bet over the total. I like it quite a bit. You look at Eastern Washington last year, 52nd in the country in tempo. And by the way, it's worth pointing out, David Riley, head coach, 52nd, and think about it, they're 52nd in the country last year in pace. He's coming into this season saying, that's too slow. We got to speed it up even more. Honestly, there's quotes out there. If you search Eastern Washington in Google News or whatever, you're going to see a quote from the coach saying, we actually should play faster than that. So they actually want to even speed it up more this season, Eastern Washington. They're a terrible defensive team. You mentioned it in their this season, and I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better this year. They gave up 84 points in the loss to Santa Clara. In their opener, 84-72. That game got to 156. Yale, when you look at this team, tempo-wise, they're top 100 in the country, 88th. They're a team that, offensively, there's some pieces to replace. They really are going to rely quite a bit here on Matt Noling in terms of their offense this year. They got some, of their top, I'd say 3 or 4 scorers to replace, but they still might be able to score at will against Eastern Washington with the lack of defensive ability we've often seen from them. So I'm totally with you 100%. Fast-paced, both teams, reasonable total in the 140s. Usually when you get teams that are tempo-wise as highly up the rankings as both of these teams are, the total is guaranteed to be at least in the 150s. You're not getting that here. So I agree, value over the total for sure with Yale and EWU.
Definitely, that is it for me. My lone, we talked about the few, was the San Diego State BYU game, which I think I'm going to move on the under. But that was it for me. Let's rip what you have, and then we'll hit all the chat. Chat, if you got anything the next 10 minutes while Ian rolls through his,
Yeah.
Let's hit us any other games that he doesn't hit us with any of them.
Absolutely. Now's the time to get your questions in. Specific games of again. Make sure you try to keep it to games that we haven't already talked about on the show. I know some people join late, so maybe they missed the first few games. But yeah, we will definitely hit on games that we have not discussed yet in the Q&A from all of our great viewers. So get those in the chat right now. Jose will put a little star beside them, and I'll know which ones to hit. All right, I'm going to go rapid fire with the bets. I'm on FAU as a dog against Ole Miss. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Ole Miss this year. I mean, I think it's make or break season, honestly, for Kermit Davis now, who's been here for a few years, and things have kind of gotten worse for Ole Miss basketball the last couple of years. So I like the points there with Florida Atlantic. I think they'll be an improved squad this year. I'm on Belmont, the Bruins, +9 against Furman, the Paladins. I like Furman a lot, no question about that, but and offensively, they are going to be very, very tough to stop. This is one of the most efficient teams. The ball movement is exquisite. When they are on offensively, they can absolutely shred opposing teams. There's no denying that. And of course, they routinely can get to the 80s and the 90s. Belmont with a 70-69 win against Ohio, although they did their best to blow that game. They didn't get the cover. But now they're dogs. I think there's a little bit of a negative sentiment coming from that game where they barely hung on against Ohio. Getting 9 with Belmont, a team with that offensive capability, I'm interested. I like the over as well in that game, 144.5. But I like the side Belmont there as well. I like the over in Charleston, North Carolina, but unfortunately, so does everybody else from the looks of it, because that total in that game opened 156.5 and all the way up to 163 now. I mean, Charleston played incredibly fast in their first game of the season earlier this week against Chattanooga. And I think you're going to see more of the same here against North Carolina. I wouldn't even mind taking the points with Charleston. I think they've got the offensive firepower to maybe keep themselves inside a number of this magnitude. And when you look at North Carolina, the deep run all the way to the championship game last year, might be a team that early in the season is going to try to settle in and maybe not be at their absolute best early on. And you look at that first game with Wilmington, it was a bit of a struggle for them, 69-56. So I would lean a little bit to the Charleston side a little bit, but I certainly agree with the over move. But again, though, you're talking about 7-point move up to 163 with that total, but I think it is definitely a move that's warranted. I laid 6 with K-State against Cal. I think Cal's that bad. I really do. And Kansas State, people are really trying to write this team's obituary because they are projected to be bottom feeder in the Big 12. But I love the way they played in the first game. Now, it was only Rio Grande Valley. I get it. Not the greatest opponent, but Cal just lost to UC Davis, and they really were behind most of that game. It's going to be rough. I mean, where do they score the basketball? They have no offense. They don't have a lot of great shooters on this team. The program has not gotten any better under Mark Fox. This is another guy that's definitely on the hot seat. And I think this young coach of Kansas State that's taken over, Jerome Tang, definitely a good situation for him. K-State, I think they're writing off K-State prematurely. I think this team's still going to be a little bit better than people think. And this is more than a winnable game for them against a really, really weak Cal team. So I don't lay road points very often, but I'm going to go with the 6.5 now, Kansas State, and lay it with them on the road. I mentioned Iona Hofstra. I like the over in that game. It's already gone up 149.5. I think you can still play it 154.5 now. Iona under Rick Pitino going to be a very good offensive team, no question. Solid defensively, but Hofstra can flat out fill it up. Speedy Claxton, of course, their head coach once again. I like over the total there when it comes to Iona and Hofstra. Penn plus the points against Missouri. I like the idea of this Penn Quakers team against a suspect Missouri team catching double digits. I think Penn's got the potential there to hang around in that game as well. A couple more here before we wrap it up. Oh, Georgia and Wake Forest. This is one of my favorite sides. I like Wake laying the points against Georgia. Georgia struggled against Western Carolina, who just got buried by Maryland last night. I was lucky as shit to cash with Western Carolina last night. They got through the back door in the last minute or two, but they were getting destroyed by Maryland for much of that game. And Georgia struggled to ever pull away from that Western Carolina team in their first game. I'm not a fan of Mike White. I think Florida underachieved the entire time Mike White coached that team. And I think when you look at it, He's going to not be the answer here for Georgia after the disastrous Tom Crean era. They're replacing a lot. Their offense is stagnant. And this is now year 3 for Steve Forbes. I've always waxed poetic on this guy as a coach, that I liked him. I liked the trajectory of Wake Forest. They brought in some nice transfers in the offseason. I think they win by double digits here at home against Georgia. So I like Wake Forest laying the points in that game. I'm on Portland, the Pilots again, 15.5. I think Portland's bet on all the way. They destroyed Florida A&M in their first game. They're a terrific offensive team. And don't look now, but I think they've got a better defensive team than they had last year as well. So I like Portland to roll once again over Portland State. I'm on the over with Pepperdine and Fullerton. Pepperdine plays fast, sometimes doesn't play much defense. Long Beach and UCLA is a tricky game, but I can make a case, even though UCLA likes to slow it down, good defensive team. Long Beach wants to speed it up. I could see that one getting over a modest total there, 143 in that game. And a couple more. I laid it with Purdue. I think it's a big mismatch against Austin Peay. I took Bryant and the over against Dartmouth, but the problem is both of those numbers have moved a ton. 6 now when they open near a pick'em, Bryant as favorites against Dartmouth. The over's gone up to 151. I still lean that way. I took Liberty plus the points against Alabama. I think Liberty is just that kind of matchup that can give a team like Alabama fits, slow it down, play defense. They guard the perimeter. And it's not like Alabama got their 3-point shooting ironed out last year. That was always a problem for them. So Liberty plus the points. And one more to wrap up this huge rapid fire of all the bets I've placed on this big card. Southern and Arizona. That total, I couldn't believe it stayed at 156 for as long as it did. I'm like, what am I missing here? This total has stayed at 156 all day. I bet it at over 156, like middle of the day, early afternoon. Well, just in the last hour or two, that total went from 156 to 161, a move upward. And if you saw the Arizona Nicholls State game, I mean, that was a track meet up and down. Southern plays a top 100 pace as well. Not obviously, they're going to struggle a lot to score against Arizona. That's the one concern, but I still think you could get another 100 put on the board by Arizona. And if you could, all you need is like 58 from Southern and you get up and over the total. So I like that game over with Southern and Arizona. So there you go.
Let me touch on a few of those real quick. You know what? I wouldn't play Kansas State at all. That one's dicey, but I think if there was a time to do it, it's there. Cal is just, they're going to have a struggle all year long, definitely with them. So that one's still tough. I'd like it if it was just like, 2.5, 3. I'd like it a little bit better. And that's a team that's going to be at the bottom is K-State, this year. But I just think you're right. It's going to take a minute for Cal to get rolling. I forget there was one more I wanted to mention about. I forgot. Sorry. But go on. Let's hit the questions.
All right. Let's get to the questions to wrap up the show, and then we'll get to best bets after that, and we will wrap it up. We'll get to a few that we didn't talk about. Baylor minus 27.5 from Ed. Lots of points, but Baylor is good. Yeah, I wouldn't step in front of Baylor. Now, I did bet Baylor the first game, but that was because Mississippi Valley State is one of the worst teams in Division I college basketball. Like there's like 350 some teams, and Mississippi Valley State's like 350, like right near the bottom. Obviously, the opponent tonight for Baylor, a little bit better, Norfolk State, but it's a Norfolk State team. Again, they fall into that SWAC, MEAC combination of conferences where they're just athletically overwhelmed by a team like Baylor. So I didn't lay it with Baylor this time, but I wouldn't be looking to bet Norfolk State. So, Ed, if you want to lay the points, I say go ahead.
I'd lay it too, real quick. There's just right now Baylor should get it done. It's all about the focus with a lot of these big numbers on some of these teams, and maybe the last 5 minutes where they took everyone out. And there could be junk points. That always hurts in a college basketball. And if you're laying the number and a bucket or two, and they win by 23.
All right, Western Illinois and DePaul from our guy Nunya in the chat here. Western Illinois catching a healthy number here as underdogs in this game. Rob Jeter, of course, the head coach at Western Illinois. Tony Stubblefield once again back for DePaul. DePaul was sloppy against Loyola Maryland, only won 72-66. in that game. We saw Western Illinois get the victory against Illinois State, 71-68. Again, this is a Western Illinois team that they're going to want to speed things up. They want to play fast. DePaul usually does want to play above average pace here. I wasn't necessarily looking at a side here in this one, although I understand the trepidation to lay points with DePaul. They didn't look good at all in their opener. I'd kind of lean to the over here at 145.5. Nothing on the side, but I will say this: after what I saw from DePaul that first game, I'm definitely not interested in laying 15. So by default, it would be a lean to Western Illinois.
Yeah, there's no way right now 15 with DePaul. And I'm not crazy. Western Illinois, this team at times can struggle, but I was hoping that'd be like 19 or 18. I really like a lot more, but that'd be my lean is to the points with them. The Leathernecks.
I lean Loyola Chicago here. Jake Burns in the chat asking about Loyola Chicago here. Is they take on Illinois Chicago. Illinois Chicago, I think things are going to be a little bit rough for that group this season. Loyola Chicago, of course, they've been one of the top teams every single season in their conference. You look at UIC, though, coming into this year, Luke Yaklich, the coach, you can't put anything into the win against Trinity Christian as far as I'm concerned. Fairleigh Dickinson in the first game for Loyola Chicago, they only escaped in overtime 88-82, but I do think there's a little bit of a mismatch here in terms of certainly defensive acumen. Illinois Chicago is going to be a team that's going to struggle to get stops, I think, on the defensive end of the basketball court. And if you look at them offensively last year, that was an offense that would go in massive, massive droughts. So if Loyola Chicago is locked in defensively, I think, it's going to be tough for UIC to score. I also think that the under's worth a look in this game, but so does everybody else. 139 down to 135. But again, the reason I would lean under too is I don't know what you're going to get from UIC tonight offensively.
Yeah, I don't know what you're going to get there. I lean Loyola Chicago. This is tough. I saw last year they beat them by 11.
Yeah.
Just kind of the rivalry between them. It wasn't enough for me to jump all over it, but I like the under a little bit better. I know last year's game it got over, but I think if the defense comes to play, Loyola should shut them down, and maybe cover. It wasn't a play for me. Just lean.
Yeah. You want to talk about a great first half of basketball? If you've got this UAB Toledo game on, it's been great. Back and forth, lots of lead changes. It's been a lot of fun. 37-35 UAB late first half. Been a really entertaining basketball game there, and I knew it would be. Two good teams there outside the power conferences. I love games like that. A couple more briefly, and then we'll get to best bets. I think there's a couple. Robert Franklin mentioning Arizona, minus 27. I didn't bet the side there. I lean Arizona. I just like the over more. You're never quite sure how focused and locked in they are on the defensive end. Southern could get a bunch of garbage points, and they are a better offensive team than defensive. That's why I bet the over, but I'm certainly not standing in front of Arizona. That's a damn good basketball team. Tommy Lloyd already in just his second year has done such a good job with them. I would lean Arizona, but I only bet the over. And Rob Free, we talked about Cal K-State earlier. I'm on K-State in that game. Coppin State and over 137.5 versus Mount St. Mary's for Nunya in the check. Coppin State plays fast, no question about that. So definitely a team I'm looking to bet overs with. Mount St. Mary's, though, not so much. It's kind of a little pace war here in this one a little bit. So I stayed off it, but I wish you luck. Connor, any thoughts on those games?
No, I leaned over initially. It's come up, and we've seen it. Now it's dropped back down some places to 138.5 in that Coppin game. Not really on those. I wanted to mention, I agree with you with Portland. To me, and Portland State, they were a very bad basketball team last year, and they lost a ton. I don't know what you're going to get out of them. I would lay it again with the Pilots. Hey, they got to that team total the other night pretty with ease. It's at like 80 again. Right around there, 80, they probably get it. So I'd like team total or just lay the 15-16 with Portland.
And briefly on the big favorites that Jake mentioned, Iowa passed on that game. Didn't really like the dog enough, but passed on laying that many with Iowa. Illinois, same thing. The favorite that I like the most of your trifecta there, and I think this is a bet on team, addition by subtraction. Mike White, get out. I don't think they ever played as well as they could have under him. Florida now brings in Todd Golden. who did a nice job coaching San Francisco, the Dons, all those years in the West Coast Conference. They're playing faster. They're, I think, a lot more fluid offensively. If you look at the Stony Brook game earlier this week, I couldn't believe I was watching Florida offensively. They looked fluid. They looked like they had a plan. They were sharing the ball. It was impressive to watch. I think Florida lays the wood to Kennesaw State. I actually did bet that Florida side. I forgot to mention it. So thank you, Jake, for that question on Florida. I like Florida laying the points. I think there's a bet on team. I'm laying it with them against Kennesaw State tonight. I think it's an upgrade at the coaching spot. They look like they're letting the offense go. I also think there's going to be some value with overs for Florida because, again, San Francisco played an above-average tempo under Golden. He's bringing that here to Florida, to the Swamp. So I like Florida minus the points against Kennesaw. I like the over 142.5 as well.
You want to hit, did you hit this one, Ian, the Northwestern, minus 17?
No, I did not. Northwest. I passed on that game. I wish I could even give you a lean. I thought that was a tricky game. Northwestern's not a team I'm comfortable laying points with, but if you've seen Northern Illinois, that's a team that offensively can struggle at times. So I'm totally off it.
Yeah, I'm off it as well. What about that Old Dominion? Did you talk about that or no?
No, I don't think we did. We did not talk about Old Dominion against, let me just see here, Drexel.
Drexel.
I think Drexel's rebuilding a little bit, so I understand the money coming in on Old Dominion. But here again, another team that offensively I've never really loved this team being trusting them to score points and in the favorites role. You know what I mean? I think they're probably better than Drexel right now, but only a lean for me to Old D.
Definitely. Aaron, we talked about BYU San Diego State. It's crept up for me. And once I saw 140, I'm on the under. And I think San Diego State wins it. That's just, it's large. I don't know what we get from BYU. I'm interested to watch that game a lot. Any more we want to hit? And I gotta answer our guy Damon.
Michigan.
Is there Noya real quick? Yeah, he did. But I gotta answer this question from him. More annoying fan base than New Mexico. BYU. If you're UNLV, been around here. BYU. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and we'll do one last question. Dave JW, because we didn't talk Michigan and Eastern Michigan. There's a lot of money on Eastern Michigan in that game. Maybe because it's a rivalry game. Maybe because Michigan's a little bit, maybe not as amped up for that game. Maybe that's the reason for it. But Michigan looked pretty damn good against IPFW, their first game, 75-56 in that game. Pretty impressive performance in that one for them. Eastern Michigan, on the other hand, they played Wayne State and struggled. I mean, it was just a late surge to pull away. I mean, I'm not in a rush to take Eastern in that game, honestly. I didn't lay it with Michigan because I'm always leery with these little brother, big brother matchups. But I'm not involved in taking the steam on Eastern Michigan here. In fact, I think if you're going to bet it now, you lay it with Michigan. I like the way they played in their opener.
I like how they played. I got to see more. That's just like one of those. I don't want to be involved. Second game of the year could go anyway, backdoor, something like that. So I'm off as well.
All right, great stuff. Thanks to everyone in the chat for sending in your questions, and we appreciate all of you joining us again for the Net Profit Show. We're ready to wrap up the show and wrap up the week of shows here with college basketball Net Profit. Let's get to best bets to wrap it up. Connor Mack, we'll start with you. What do you like for best bet?
Let's get to it. I'll give you a few here. SMU, I took the 13. That's up to you if you want the 11 there. I still think it's okay. Villanova, lay it. I laid the 5.5. I think they cover there. Princeton Navy, over 134.5. Next, me and Ian agreed on it. The over, Yale, Eastern Washington, 147. Even now at 148, I think it's at. You're golden there. And I added it. It's later. I was maybe not going to add it, but I'm adding it. Under San Diego State BYU. Once I saw 140 and we're seeing buyback, I think finally I'm on the under there. That's it for tonight.
There you go. Best bets for Connor Mack. I'm going to keep it to one best bet for the Friday card here tonight because it truly does stand out above the rest, in my opinion. Wake Forest, -7 against Georgia. I think that line is short. I'm not a Georgia fan of this team. Tom Crean left it in the ditch. It was a terrible basketball team last year. I think it's a rebuild in progress right now for Mike White, a coach I don't even like all that much because I thought Florida could have done a whole lot better when he was there. Don't like the hire. Don't like the way Georgia's gone. They've gone downhill. And Wake Forest is a team on the rise in the ACC. They're at home. It's a reasonable number. You're not laying double digits. You're only laying 7. in this game. Demon Deacons get it done. Wake -7 against Georgia. That's going to be my best bet for tonight.
Excellent. Real quick, shout out all the guys in green, the Green Men. Become a member here, $4.99 a month. And we're going to get more into, we've been in talks of what we want to do with it. We don't want to, maybe do these shows where it's member only. We're really thinking about what we want to do with some of, what the membership comes with. But it just supports Pub Sports Radio and everything we do here. So we'd really, really appreciate if you guys did that. And lastly, before you want to hit anything, Ian, hit the like button. That's all I ask. We got, over 130 in here. Come on, give me 100. Give me 100 likes. That's all I ask. That's all I need. And let's have a Friday. Good luck.
Let's have a Friday night. Yeah, hit the like button on the way out. And stay tuned 10 minutes from now. Dabby Cab and Razor, Gonzaga, Michigan State, live bet stream coming up, college basketball. Make sure you tune in for that. And Connor's add-on was BYU San Diego State under. That was the add-on best bet.
Yeah, under 140.
Someone was asking. There you go. All right, great stuff. That's a wrap for the Friday edition of the College Basketball Net Profit Show. Us two will be back, Connor and I, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, college football, Pub Hub Show. Join us for that. Can't wait. It'll be me, Connor Mack, and Big Ragu. Probably no DJ Big Boss. He's still ailing. We wish him all the best.
It's good to hear from him. I've heard from him. He's doing better. Shout out to Boss. Sorry,
absolutely. We'll hold it down for him tomorrow morning, and we've got him in our thoughts right now for sure. We will see you in the morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, college football Pub Hub. Right here on Pub Sports Radio. For Connor Mack, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Friday night. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll see you again on Monday. We'll be back with you 5 p.m. Eastern for another edition of College Basketball Net Profit right here on Pub Sports Radio.